Well, we already have some folks joining us here. So good morning, Rabbi Joseph. It's good to see you as always. And as always, you find these stories that don't make the New York Times, so far as I know.
Not yet.
Not not to cast aspersions on it since your daughter works for them, but so explain to us why some Republicans in Congress are trying to protect the phrase that the Jews killed Jesus. Why is this? Why
So
is this horrible?
last year, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, and I want to focus on the title of the legislation because the irony of this is beyond my. So last year, prior to the Trump inauguration, it was a Republican-led House of Representatives that wanted to pass legislation to use in the presidential election to further divide the Democrats. Ergo, anti Semitism awareness. Elise Stefanik doing her McCarthy impression in eviscerating
Does it well?
immensely incompetent presidents of universities. Okay, during the first committee meeting, you had Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, wait a minute,
All the
you're
serious people.
using a definition of anti Semitism, which was created in Europe in a coalition of countries defining anti Semitism post Holocaust. The definition uses 10 examples. One of the examples is referring to Jews as Christ killers, the oldest problematic of Christian scripture anti-Judaism. Something we have to go back to Vatican II, John the 23rd, who said, I think we have a problem in the text. The answer, after his death, Pope Paul VI, okay, we're no longer going to refer to this text in the Passion as a historical text. It's a literary exaggeration. Gaetz and Greene, who represent, I'm sorry, Protestant Christian
Whoa, 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 whoa.
nationalists.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I don't claim them.
I know you don't claim them, but I'm sorry, they represent that fault line in American Protestant public religion. Can I put it that way?
I Just the problem with Jesus liking to hang out with sinners is some of them look like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Okay. I don't know how they got invited, but there they are. And they said the Constitution permits our religious freedom, our right as Christians to say the text says Jews killed Christ. The Senate won't pass the original Anti Semitism Awareness Act. It gets carried over into the Trump administration. The Senate is now having committee hearings. Now Bernie Sanders says, wait a minute, I need to amend this bill to include the possibility of criticizing the Israeli government is not anti-Semitic.
Huh.
Okay, that works. The next day, Senator Kennedy from Louisiana says, oh, by the way, we need to amend this to permit the religious freedom under the Constitution to say Jews killed Christ. We now have Matt Gaetz no longer in the House, Marjorie Taylor Greene still in the House, and now the senator who is the committee chair of the Anti Semitism Awareness Act, saying we can be aware, but we still have the right to say it. I thought that moment belonged on your program. We're aware that the ADL refers to that as anti-Semitic. The definition used in the legislation says that's anti-Semitic. We have to be aware of it. That's all. We're aware of it, but we still want the Constitution to protect our right to say it.
Well, as you pointed out, so this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Tommy Tuberville, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Uh, uh, Roger Marshall of Kansas, don't have any opinions on him. And Bill Cassidy, who was the decisive vote, the decisive vote for Robert Kennedy Jr. So yeah, one can have opinions on this cast of characters. And you could say that defending the right to say that Jews killed Jesus is itself anti-Semitic.
But and that's why my mind explodes with the name of the bill, anti-Semitism. Oh, where? Excuse me. You want us to be aware you are anti-Semitic, and look, I think I've told the story before, but let me tell it again. I was 7 years old in San Francisco the first time I was called a Christ killer. The boy across the street with whom I played baseball came home from catechism and said to me, I learned you killed Christ. I can't play baseball with you anymore. Here was the problem. There were 3 of us on this block. One person had a ball, one person had a bat, one person had a glove. He had the ball. I didn't know Christ. I didn't remember killing him.
Is that
But
why you're a lousy baseball player now?
that's it. That's why I didn't make it to the major leagues. That's it. Uh, it was a transformative moment. I had never experienced anti-Semitism before. My parents had to explain to me what that meant. It was only the first time I was called a Christ killer. Uh, the fact that I'm going to be 79, so for 72 years, I've lived with the experience of what that term means. It helped motivate me to become a rabbi, to do doctoral work in anti-Semitism, and to have Jewish-Christian relations as the cornerstone of my being a rabbi. And now the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act has brought it up again, and the Constitution is what makes them right to say it. And I thought that was worth a conversation.
Yeah, so I was thinking, um, so we're doing a short series through the Book of Ruth for Eastertide. And yesterday I was reading Ruth chapter 2 again. And Ruth's language to Boaz um, around favor is almost lifted from Genesis on the lips of Hagar to God. And I was like, I've never even noticed this before. And it's just a reminder that there are people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Christians like her, who pay a lot of lip service to the importance of the Bible without being a very good reader of it. That I think a lot of harm done to people like you is done not out of animus, but out of a Christianity that has not taught Christians how to read the Bible well.
Absolutely. I don't think the boy across the street had any animus. It came from a pre-Vatican II catechism. Um, when people say, but that's what the text says, it can't be anti-Semitic if the text says it. I want to start the conversation there.
Well, even in the context of, I mean, we've talked about this before, but the Jews in the Gospel of John, only an idiot would conclude that means all Jews everywhere. like, like if nothing else, John's distinguishing those Jews from the disciples. And it works the same, so I know a lot of preachers are working their way through Acts now, on the lectionary. The apostles' sermons in Acts will often refer to the you who killed Jesus. But this is you not in the sense of all Jews. It's like these are literally the people who were in the mob, like if the Jews are the antagonists, why does Rome end up killing Paul? And Peter,
And what
just
does the Jews mean in that context?
mhm,
Because the word Jew itself does not even appear in the vocabulary until the 9th century. Maybe Judeans,
mhm,
but not Jews.
mhm.
Okay. That's before the end of the quote biblical period. The temple still stood. So
So if you're an Ethiopian Jew, you're good.
yeah, I'm okay. Okay. If I'm Moroccan Jew, I must be okay. Um, yes, I think you're right. It's not just they do it without man animus, but at some point, how long do we need to give them the permission of ignorance
Mhm.
to
I agree.
misrepresent a text? Quote, if you're in the House of Representatives or you're a United States Senator, do you think you should wait and not misrepresent American Protestant Christianity? Do you think you should have enough humility to say, I think I'm going to call up someone who really knows this?
Well, I shudder to think that they did do that, and that they are representing the views of a lot of Christians in their states, and it's probably the case, given where they're from.
Well, so let's go back to the title of the bill, Anti Semitism Awareness Act. Okay, let's be aware this remains a problem.
I mean, a racism awareness act that might be an achievement. A sexism awareness act might be a step forward.
So, how do we, clergy committed to dialogue and listening about difference, how do we respond to people who want legislation to be demeaned by this kind of misreading and abuse of a shared scripture?
Um, I think it would be more constructive if it was even possible to have a bipartisan attempt to discuss how anti-Semitism manifests on both the left and the right.
Yes.
Um, that, you know, the particulars of this bill sound just purely partisan. Um, and I think we need to distinguish between um, the kind of anti-Semitism that is just the product of well-intentioned but bad Christianity, bad Christian readings of Scripture. Um, that's one thing. Um, versus uh, what is, I think, incontrovertibly a mysterious and demonic force that has been with us throughout history, going all the way back to Pharaoh.
And we live in a time, Deborah Lipstadt refers to anti Semitism immediately as a horseshoe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, which part of the horseshoe initiates, is it the right side or the left side? And so, even as we're referred back to scripture and the Constitution, we're facing protests at Columbia in which pro Palestinians have tried to shut down the library,
Uh-huh.
which has engaged the president in stopping universities by denying funding because I'm combating anti Semitism.
And that's another way of thinking about it too, right? Because ostensibly, uh, folks on the right who have the moral high ground when it comes to critiquing things like the Columbia protest, like you give over that moral high ground as soon as you defend a phrase like "the Jews killed Jesus." Um,
So, okay, now we have a moment in which our awareness must look at both sides of the horseshoe. Well, we are in a place in history where we can't even agree upon the definition of the term for which you want to pass legislation to be aware. So we can't have a adult conversation about its complexity.
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
The
I think.
fact that a member of the United States legislature believes that the Constitution is, in fact, a protective barrier to sustain hatred.
Well, I think one can be a free speech absolutist and not choose this particular hill to die on.
Okay, there you go. But is this a moment in which the zeitgeist tells us something about division, hatred, chaos over and against constructive community building?
Yeah, yeah, community build. That's what I was thinking. That I think. I mean, this is how we got started, right? That um, I think uh, bad Christian readings of Scripture exist on one side, um, kind of an unreflective anti-Israel position exists on the other side, um, and absent, I think, largely is a constructive theology of Jewish Christian um, relationship beyond that goes beyond just kind of sentimental ecumenism.
Something
Um,
more than kumbaya?
yeah, that like okay, Jesus was raised from the dead, but not everybody was. Why the delay? What particular vocation does God have for both of us that catches both of us up together? Um, most Christians don't have the ability to articulate that. And in its absence, other stuff grows up. And so you're either, on the one hand, you're like, you support Israel purely for political reasons. You on the other side, you want to have cooperative relationships that make you just sound like another garden variety liberal.
It's the complexity of reading that both of us bring to our relationship. It's a shared text that requires careful, critical conversations.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And if that isn't where we begin, maybe you shouldn't quote it as the source of your particular awareness of anti Semitism.
Well, yeah, and I do think. I think Stanley Hauerwas talks about this, that part of the implication for the continuing vocation of the Jews for Christians is that Christians always have to be ready and open um, to Jewish critique of our reading of Scripture.
And I want to make sure I take the opportunity to take the word critique. And for me, not offer it as a construct of criticism,
Uh-huh.
but offer it as an engagement of perspective.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, you're aside, you're aside about John 13 during Holy Week, about the foot washing, and hearkening back to Abraham. Um, I suspect that upended most of the sermons that were preached on Holy Thursday. you know, um, that um, that Jesus is playing the host. That is not how that text is normally presented in church.
And it saddens me that we share a common text of origins. We may use terms that are different, but it's the same text. You might read it not in the original Hebrew. You might read it in a translation that already interprets it, but it's the same text. And the source of that text, redactors notwithstanding, is a source of transcendence. That's where we should both be. And when people take that away, that we don't share that common source of transcendence. And that's what infuriated me about Gates, Greene, Cassidy. No, no, don't do that, because you're taking away what is common ultimately to religion in America.
Uh-huh. And
Those Puritans that came wanted to use on the seal of the new country the crossing of the Sea of Reeds.
uh-huh. Um, yeah, I mean, another thought I had to this that you sent is just, um, I don't know, the the ease with which Greene and Gates are quoted as defending uh, this anti-Semitic trope. Um, yeah, that kind of speech is only done in an absence of any sort of friendship with Jews.
Yes.
Um,
Honest friendship.
and maybe that's the bigger problem.
Yes, that's right. It's tasteless.
Yeah.
There are certain things now that we've accepted in a painful moment of shrugging our shoulders regarding what the president does.
Mhm.
It's just tasteless. You don't create a meme of becoming a pope to be then told you have no sense of humor. Right. Because some things are so tasteless, you don't do them. And arguing that the Constitution's protection of religious freedom permits you to read that text over and against its anti Semitic use. Yeah, that's tasteless.
Well, I mean, it's the Constitution like permits me to put on a white robe and burn a cross in my front yard. I have that freedom. Um, but I don't know that Christians are the people who should be. should, we're like, what am I saying? Christians should care more about their Jewish neighbors than they do the First Amendment.
Thank you. That's it. And especially if the title of the bill is awareness. And does that begin with self awareness, Pastor?
Well, I don't. I mean, I think you could. I mean, I don't know that the people who ascend to these offices are necessarily the most self-aware people. Maybe that's a requirement.
Yes. And I don't know what to do with that. That is becoming more and more the default reality of a leaderless world.
Mhm.
people who are simply not self-aware enough. And then when you criticize them, that criticism is not a critique in the way you and I engage, but a critique which has to be protected by the constitutional right of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Is that why dialogue, as we model it, as we attempt it, is so just passe?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I was thinking about this again in relation to Ruth, that it's important that it is set during the time of the judges, right? That um, at a time when it seems like everything is horrible, um, there is this quiet work of God going on in this community, um, such that at the end of Ruth, despite what the law says about how to treat Moabites, they all bless this wedding. Um, every single one of them.
Merely Moabites, but remember who Boaz is? Boaz comes from that fascinating chapter 38 in Genesis.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tamar and Judah, her father in law. And remember where the Moabites come from? Genesis 19, drunken incest, Lot and his elder daughter. So,
This is why the Jesse tree is so problematic in Christian practice. It's just like,
okay, guess what? David's beginnings are as problematic as David's behavior.
mhm, mhm. Yeah.
There you have, okay, we're going to take one of the countries, the tribes that is forbidden, and link it with a person born of a relationship that is a little, yes. I think I've said this before to you. There are some passages in the Hebrew Bible that were late additions.
Mhm.
And in response to an emerging community that laid claim to transcendent finality, eschatological.
Well, and it's, it's not unrelated to these articles you sent me, that within the text itself is this tension against the text
That's
towards
it.
welcome and inclusion. And so, yeah. So if you're reading the text in a way, um, that draws distinctions and makes boundaries, you're misreading them.
And there is no such thing in the Hebrew Bible as purity. Forget that. If you're expecting the best to come from the holiness,
Yeah.
it
So
won't be there.
yeah. So the reason I mentioned Ruth in the beginning was it was I think you know I think that Ruth is a story that reminds us, um, when it seems like there are a lot of horrible things beyond our control, God is at work, in mundane, ordinary, unseen ways, and we just have to trust. We just have to do what is right, um, and trust the quiet work of God.
Do you know when we read the book of Ruth in the Jewish community?
I don't.
Shavuot.
Oh, makes sense.
It is the Megillah. It is the book set aside to be read on, quote, Pentecost.
Hmm.
Just as Israel chose God at Sinai, so Ruth chose the Jewish people. She is a Georet. I don't like the word convert because it's unique to Saul becoming Paul.
Mm.
Here, there's no state of sin to change. Here, there is someone who was a daughter in law who chooses to become part of the community of her mother in law. Your people will be my people. Your destiny will be my destiny. That choice is what makes Ruth essential for Boaz.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what else is going on in the life of Joseph Edelheit?
Working on rereading some brilliant lectures about Paul so I can formulate a way to introduce the text to be read and heard.
Huh.
That's what is going on in my life.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any final thoughts on these articles here?
Yes, I hope anyone listening to this will tell their friends to stop assuming a text which is painfully misused and abused can be a byline about congressional awareness of anti-Semitism. If you're on the other side of being called a Christ killer, that's pain and trauma that Christians need to continue to unpack. They misread both history and God's intent in those scriptures.
And then before you go, one, I don't know if it's the fault of journalism or the once and again president, but he seems to consume people's attention, and other stories get missed. And so, what are your thoughts about the conflict in Gaza and Israel right now?
I'm at a moment of personal grief. Um, Yesterday at a rabbinic meeting here in Brazil, I asked my colleagues. Yesterday was Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, and for us to share two sentences of hope. 77 years since the establishment of the State of Israel, 80 years this past April since the camps, concentration and death camps, were liberated. And we are engulfed in a conflict which once again reminds us of survival. What does it mean to merely survive? If a new war in which starvation is used to destroy an enemy, I'm at a different moment in my moral relationship with the government of Israel, not the people of Israel, not the survival of the people and the religions, but the government. I'm not yet sure how to handle this. To make statements in opposition is to be drawn back into the simplicity of becoming then pro-Palestinian,
Mm-hmm.
pro-Hamas. We've just had a conversation about nuance doesn't work well today.
Yeah.
I think we all need to, and we've said this to each other, we have to say to each other, what do you mean? I want the state of Israel to survive. I do not want it to survive with this government and these policies.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've lived a life in which issues of civil rights, Vietnam, I've had to make decisions before. Um, I think all human beings must confront the moral dilemmas of being an individual inside a community. I don't know that you can get away with being an individual and ignoring the community.
Mm-hmm.
So, to answer your question, I'm demoralized once again, Jason. I'm demoralized that there are 3 more hostages that have died. I'm demoralized that the government of Israel does not seem to want to return the hostages as much as it wants the stupidity of total victory over terrorism. That's not something achievable. The term terrorism is not an object to be destroyed. It's
Yeah.
an idea.
George W. Bush learned that lesson. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and this confuses lots and lots of people. And in a world which is leaderless, in which division, chaos, instability are the hour by hour, day by day atmosphere, yeah, let's pass an anti Semitism Awareness Act in which we claim the right to believe Jews killed Christ.
It's like an episode of Veep.
Except they knew that would be tasteless.
Speaking of television, I watched September 5th last night.
What'd
It
you
was quite
think?
good. It was quite good, and I think I liked it better than Munich, which is
Oh,
a
yes.
hard
It's a
a hard
different movie.
Munich is a hard movie to watch.
Yeah. What I found fascinating, and I know journalists, is that is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
That they had to improvise, do it all improv. They weren't a news source. They were a sports source. And did you hear in the lingo the word terrorist is being used?
For the first time, yeah.
And it was about hostages.
Yeah. It was a good movie. I would commend it to anyone.
We're still having that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, it felt timely.
Yeah. Tragic how timely. So I hope those who listened will make sure you take seriously the misreading and abuse of the scripture that is essential to your identity.
You know, it's in the United Methodist Church. I don't celebrate or observe any of these. We have these um, denominationally designated Sundays, like older adults Sunday, and we've got all these Sundays, and they all come with their own offering envelopes. And I'm like, why? I'm like, no, we're not sending money out the door every Sunday. This is a terrible idea. So I've never done that. But like, we should have like make a Jewish friend day. Like
There you go.
Maybe we just start with that.
There you go.
The friend of Jew.
A Methodist Church Jewish Awareness Sunday.
I was the guest at Congregation Olam Tikva here in Fairfax, Virginia, a couple Sundays ago, representing all Christians everywhere. But it was like 8th and 9th graders, so like their questions were more like, "What's your favorite ice cream?" And "Do you believe in reincarnation?" I do. So it was pretty tame.
Good. Well, I'm glad they knew they could call someone they could mutually trust.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the only conservative congregation in Northern Virginia. Yeah, it was large, friendly congregation.
Good. Well, thanks for talking about anti-Semitism awareness.
Well, I absolve you of